Welcome to week 7. We're almost done. I'm going to record week 7 and then week 8. Both of those modules are open for you this week, and so it's something for you to kind of get into and do some depth study, hopefully, and get things done. This is a week 7 project piece. Is something we're going to review for a while today. It's a pretty comprehensive assignment that's due this Sunday. And then remember that your week 8 assignment is due on Friday the 18th. And so those are some things to kind of keep in mind as we go through these assignments and kind of work at what's going on. As you're finishing up both of your classes, or if you're only in one class, kind of keep in mind that you work hard to kind of all this time to keep up and go as well as you possibly can. So continue to work hard so to make sure that you're getting the most out of the classes as possible. And so within sharing my desktop with you right now, you can see that we're in week 7. Week 7 kind of has similar tasks and things that have been over the last 6 weeks of content that we've been through so far this session. Really focusing this week on backwards design. Backwards instructional design is one of the most powerful pieces that you can do when you finally get a new set of curriculum or anything new that's the standard base that you want to make sure that you are implementing most effectively to get to your end result. And so let me encapsulate a little bit of backwards design kind of before we get to the assignment piece and things like that, is that it is true backwards design. So if you know the learning expectations of the student and how those students are going to be assessed in a final or a summative activity, you can backwards plan out how to get students to that point that you want them to be there. And so really it causes educators to focus in on the essential standards and the essential content that's available to them as they move through the course. It really provides great and succinct direction. And so it's one of those things that you can actually look at and do a lot of good pieces for within your own class. So we have some readings to conclude some of our text from our authors in both books. And then the logic of backwards design, take a look at that. It's a good piece that will give you some more understanding of what is expected in a backwards design model as we go through our assignment. We'll talk about that also. And then both our videos kind of help to cement the process piece of looking at an assessment in backwards design. When we look at our assignment and our rubric piece for that assignment, one of the key things here is that to know it is backward design, what you're looking to do is you're trying to present a unit for us. And so keep in mind that a unit is a comprehensive length of time that's going to have a introductory piece, supporting pieces in the middle, and then a final or conclusion activity. Dependent on the way that you're going to build and to create this lesson will really be the way that it is graded and the way that you'll be scored. There are a few parts for you to make sure that you're keeping a good track of. 4 sections in this assignment that you want to look at. And if you start with a train of thought, you'll be a lot better off in the conclusion of your creation of this unit. Units can be created not in detail of everything that's being taught, but you would have some lesson plans or lesson creation template pieces within the unit itself. A summation activity piece that you would say that you're assessing the learning of things that were taught. But like I said, there's an introductory activity of things that's going to introduce the content. And then all the supporting content are pieces that are involved in that. So any vocabulary, any supportive materials that you want to scaffold in to make sure you're really submitting and bringing home the content piece. The way that I've used a lot when I started to develop a unit plan is to use a table, and kind of on that table I say this is my end of unit assessment and this is how I'm going to create my end of unit assessment. And then from that piece I backtrack in that table where I can add in different columns or rows to be an assignment that is building up to that conclusionary activity. You could have other formative or summative assessments in the unit itself. What I would like to see is at least one formative assessment written into the unit to say that you've taken pre-diagnosis to provide feedback to students to keep them on pace before we get to our final evaluation piece. One of the things as we do this is I try and throw out a challenge for the students to kind of think of the process piece this way. Think of your final activity as project-based learning, is that there's going to be a project that's going to be completed by the student that summates the understanding of the content standard that you've chosen and what that project might be. And from there, you can backwards plan a lot of the supplemental pieces of that project, which you would do formative checks to make sure the student is building up to that ending content and to make sure that they're going to have a good understanding of what's going on. So take a look at that. If you don't know much about progress-based learning, you can kind of do some samples. So there's good sample rubrics available for those, but that's just a challenge this week. If you kind of format it instead of a multiple choice assessment, look at a project as a way of giving a summative activity for your students to complete. Again, we're not necessarily looking for a text-based paper on this. You can give me a tabled outline that gives me a detailed summation of this is unit 1, this is 1.1, and in 1.1 we're doing this activity vocabulary. Here's what the students are going to do. Here's how I'm going to score it. 1.2, this is the lesson that I'm going to provide. Looking at whatever the standard is, those kinds of things. So it's not as detailed as writing out a lesson plan for each and every lesson that builds up to the totality of the unit. Okay. So hopefully you got a chance to look at this and kind of say, okay, I can use those if I already started to create them, but then also you can create them as just in a table based. But you want to be able to select a unit that is based on a Common Core standard in your area if possible. Really what they call unpacking the standards, so breaking down those standards into things that are attainable and accessible and are essential skills for students, so they call them the big ideas or understandings. And that you have really looked at what are the essential understandings of that, of that standard. And so when you look at the Common Core standards now, there's different aspects in which the way they're lay out, what activities you might see that students would be able to do in regards to that. If you look at the SBAC testing, you might see the same thing in regards to a standard and what contents they might be able to achieve, or what questions might they be able to answer in regards to a standard to make sure that they can demonstrate mastery of it. And so those are the important skills and key knowledge pieces. The next piece is the assessment. You're going to include the assessment piece. That's one of the things why I said, if you do a project-based learning environment, you're just describing the project and you're outlining expectations of what the student should understand and what you demonstrate mastery for that. I don't necessarily need a rubric or anything like that for the project. Just if you give me a paragraph of this is what this project entails, here's the kind of content that might be in it, and just then it could be in it within a table. It would be a clear way of demonstrating the unit as a whole, and that would be your assessment and the demonstration of knowledge. In our Part 3, learning activities, instruction providing specific aligned to learning expectations. So when you go through and you really have created a project or a summative assessment for the entire unit, you can go back and look at the individual pieces that are within that unit to be able to identify whether or not those are going to be effective learning modules for students to get to build up to the expected learning tasks that you're going to provide as a summative assessment. That's said, these are some formative assessment pieces, so that you want to make sure you're having a check within those for understanding and provide feedback for students so that you can monitor and adjust the instruction. Sometimes students in there, as far as putting it into a table, I've actually set aside some instruction time in their table for review or intervention for some students. The good thing about project-based learning pieces is that you can give differentiated instruction, different outcome expectations for your students. And so it really does provide for a cross gambit of results from kids that you are hosting in your class. And then I will go through and do kind of an evaluation of the curriculum design that you have put forth. Like I said, you can do it almost like what the rubric states here. And if you put the summation task at the end and then built up from there to your beginning of your unit, it's a clear way of demonstrating the pieces that are there for you to present in the unit itself. And then in there, if you just kind of write maybe a paragraph or a couple sentences about what's expected of the student, I don't necessarily need to see the rubric, but you're going to say, okay, we're going to use a rubric that's based on this, this, and this. So look at the rubric here also, so you kind of get an idea of what the scoring possibilities are for this assignment. You need to make sure you're including the standard from the Common Core or standards aligned to your curriculum, whatever that is, and that you have learning goals established in each one of your lessons. And that's why it's another good thing within a table to say, here are the learning goals that are expected within this lesson. Your assessment, that you really had a clear assessment that outlines the components that really display the necessary learning skills developed from the lessons that you've presented to a point, and then just define that learning activity really clearly so that it makes sure that we understand what the goal is as far as that instructional task. And that when you're writing your paragraphs and things, that they're all within APA, everything's formatted and has little errors or a few errors or no errors. And so we can actually go back and do an assessment piece on that. So that's how our scoring will be done on this assignment in week 7. So that's assignment 6 for week 7. Again, due this Sunday at midnight. I will get back on Thursday and Saturday. Again, if you want to communicate with me and say, hey, take a look at this, Dr. Reed, and see if it looks good, or what would you change, or anything, you want some feedback, and I'd be glad to give you that feedback piece. So one thing that we can do is you go back and you present that to me early, and I'll try to give you some feedback as quickly as possible. So that's essential piece of any instruction model, is to give feedback so that you have a chance to monitor or adjust that piece. And so, like I said, text me is the #1 way to kind of let me know that you've maybe emailed or if you've posted something on there. Again, I'll try and check on Thursday and Saturday morning, and so I can give you back some feedback. If I score your assignment on a Thursday or Saturday, that doesn't mean it's the final score. What that means is that's the score you would receive if you didn't turn it in or didn't make any changes by Sunday at 11. Okay? So it could be the final score based on whether you want to go back and do any revisions, or there's another submission attached to that. So if you didn't like the score that you received on one of those 2 grading times, then you can go back and give an editing piece. I'm going to be done grading our assignments probably by tomorrow for the last week and see how many students went to our challenge. Have a blessed week, and you all be well.